Michael, are we ready to go, or are you going to make an announcement? Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this Operation Warp Speed update today. We continue to have good news to report. As of today, shipments of vaccine will have been delivered to every delivery site identified by public health jurisdictions for our first wave of shipments. I hope that every American has been as heartened as so many of us at HHS and DoD have been to see heroic healthcare workers and vulnerable Americans getting vaccinated this week. I had the chance to see this work firsthand myself at two sites, at George Washington University Hospital and this morning at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital. What I took away from those visits is this. While Operation Warp Speed's delivery of vaccines on this time frame is extraordinary, administering these vaccines can feel quite ordinary. At GW, they were administering vaccines just like they do any other vaccines, but with all the appropriate social distancing precautions. At Georgetown this morning, the director of pharmacy, Jeff Cox, showed me the Pfizer packaging that he had received, showed me the GPS tracking and the cold chain storage tracking devices that connect directly in to General Perna's command center, where every single Pfizer box is tracked and monitored on temperature control for excursions. And he showed me their cold storage facilities. And he walked me through this very simple thawing, mixing, and extraction process. And he said, other than that this is COVID, this is pretty standard. This is what we do. And that's been the message from virtually every partner that we are working with in this endeavor. Every hospital, FedEx, UPS, McKesson, CVS, Walgreens. This is what we do. We have a great deal of work in the coming months to get a vaccine to every American who wants one. But we are confident in our approach to using the healthcare providers and institutions like hospitals and pharmacies that do such a good job of providing tens of millions of vaccines to Americans every year. For next week, we have allocated another approximately 2 million doses of Pfizer's vaccine for jurisdictions to use. And if Moderna's vaccine is authorized by the FDA in the coming days, we have allocated nearly 5.9 million doses of that product. As many of you know, on Tuesday, the FDA released the analysis that it will use to brief its independent advisory committee meeting tomorrow. The agency concluded that the vaccine is 94.5% effective in reducing the incidence of COVID-19 among the treated group, which far exceeds the standard FDA has set forth for an emergency use authorization, and they concluded that the vaccine is safe. If and when the Moderna vaccine is authorized, it will have gone through the same rigorous procedures that the Pfizer vaccine did, and that every OWS vaccine receiving emergency authorization will go through. That includes clinical trials, much larger than many vaccine trials, an independent data safety and monitoring board that oversees those trials, the drug company's own ethical standards and checks and balances, the FDA's independent and transparent advisory committee meeting, the FDA's transparent guidance standards for emergency use authorizations for COVID vaccines, and finally, the FDA's career scientific experts applying the standards that they have publicly shared. We've been heartened to see that Americans' vaccine confidence is rising substantially. According to an ABC poll this week, more than 8 in 10 Americans say they plan to take the vaccine. And Pfizer today announced 70%. So just vaccine confidence is surging. We still have much work to do to ensure that all Americans understand the value of these safe and effective vaccines, but it's clear that many Americans are learning that these vaccines are safe and extraordinarily effective. And as we get more and more healthcare workers or vulnerable seniors vaccinated and they go through the experience, as I was able to see with healthcare workers this morning, doctors and nurses from the ER, from labor and delivery, from ICUs at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital, I asked each one of them getting vaccinated how it felt getting the vaccine. Every single one of them said, I didn't feel it as much as I feel the flu vaccine shot, and had good experiences. And as the word gets out, as they talk to their friends, their colleagues, their neighbors, vaccine confidence in the United States will just increase by word of mouth, by trusted sources, every single day. Finally, I want to remind Americans that there are 2 authorized antibody treatments that Operation Warp Speed has supported that can actually help prevent hospitalizations in those patients with the highest risk for severe disease. Those are individuals 65 and above and individuals who have comorbid conditions that put them at risk of hospitalization from COVID. If you test positive and you fit in those categories, please speak to your healthcare provider immediately, because the best time to get those antibodies is not when you show up in the emergency room, but soon after being diagnosed with COVID. We've allocated over 330,000 doses of these treatments to all states and territories, and many states do have product available, even as we have people entering into the hospital with COVID. So again, if you've tested positive for COVID-19 and are at risk for severe disease based on age, weight, or underlying health conditions, or if you've got a loved one who may fall into that category, there may be a therapeutic option that could help keep you out of the hospital. Please talk to your healthcare provider. I also want to note another success that we announced yesterday that's fruits of the public-private partnerships that we've built to expand testing. Yesterday, the FDA issued an emergency use authorization for the first fully at-home diagnostic test for COVID-19 that does not require a prescription. This product was developed by Ellume with the $30 million in support from the NIH RADx program, which is the diagnostics arm of Operation Warp Speed. RADx has invested nearly $500 million in not only development of breakthrough testing options, but also expanding the production of these options. Ellume's test will cost about $30, and the company expects to be able to make millions per month in the coming year. Even with the emergence of these new tools, we are not at the finish line yet, especially as we approach the holidays. And in the coming months, we've all got to continue taking steps to keep ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities safe. It's the 3 W's. Wash your hands, watch your distance, wear your face coverings when you can't watch your distance, and avoid settings where you're going to let your guard down and not do those things like overcrowded indoor restaurants or bars, and especially those household gatherings that get multiple households together, friends and neighbors. You eat, you drink, you let your guard down then. You think that because you know people, they can't be infected, you can't infect them, you're not symptomatic, you're not going to infect them. This is how the disease is spreading right now. And this is what's leading to cases, which are leading to hospitalizations, and tragically, leading to fatalities. So we have the tools in our hands right now to bridge to the days that are upon us. We used to say to bridge to the weeks and months ahead. It's bridging to the days that are right upon us now, but we all have to act responsibly, and we'll get there, because as we look to next week and the ongoing holiday season, my goal is for everybody that's here now to be here next year for the holiday season, thanks to the vaccines and therapeutics that the heroes of Operation Warp Speed and America's biopharmaceutical industry are bringing to you. But you got to make it to that point through responsible behaviors to get to the moment when you can get vaccinated. So with that said, let me turn things over to Dr. Slaoui for a scientific and development update.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Hello, everybody. Just briefly, I hope you had a chance to look into the Moderna submission for VRBPAC and the FDA comments. I think they underline and demonstrate again how effective these messenger RNA vaccines are, and also describe very clearly their very good safety profile. Just want to highlight 2 things. Look at the Kaplan-Meier curves and look at efficacy after the first dose. 10 to 14 days after the first dose, maximum efficacy is already achieved. Of course, it doesn't mean this is a 1-dose vaccine, because people got their second dose 2 weeks later. But it just means that onset of efficacy is very fast after immunization, and we should start to see an impact in the very high-risk populations that are being immunized as we speak. The second thing that's really interesting is the apparent protection against infection as detected by PCR detection of virus on day 28 in the study population that has shown anywhere between 60-65% protection, which I think is very exciting after 1 dose. Again, we'll see that data coming up after second dose in the next few weeks. based more on a serological endpoint than a virological endpoint. And I think that will be very important from a public health perspective, at least in the short term. I expect that protection to be quite significant. Maybe its duration against infection may not be as long-lasting as the protection against disease would be. Finally, on Moderna, as you have seen in their announcement, 20 million doses will be delivered by the end of the month, and I think that's really excellent. Pfizer, just to remind you that we are working very closely with the company to ensure that we can support and help them address all the challenges in continuing to increase their capacity and output, and also at the same time discussing how we may come to an agreement on the first option for an additional 100 million of doses. Next in the portfolio is the Johnson & Johnson Janssen's vaccine. Tomorrow we will close recruitment in the phase 3 trial with about 43 to 44,000 subjects recruited. Really an outstanding performance in terms of the volunteers, which we really warmly thank for their generous participation into the trial. The trial is accruing cases very quickly. We hope that we may be able to assess efficacy a first time early in January and maybe a final time late in January. We just had this morning yet another meeting to discuss the supply chain and how we can optimize availability of vaccine doses even faster than we were thinking early on, given the speed of the clinical trial development, and have vaccine doses in February and March already impacting the US population. So we're very hopeful there. On AstraZeneca, we are about 23,000 subjects recruited in the phase 3 trial. We expect that trial to come to mostly its completion in terms of recruitment by the end of this year or very early in January, and case to accrue again during the month of January with a readout probably in February. We're also continuing to progress on the supply chain with the accumulation already, stockpiling of vaccine doses. The 2 protein vaccines also continue to progress. You have seen the announcement by Sanofi GSK with some delay vis-à-vis the phase 3 trial plans, and the Novavax vaccine is really on the starting blocks towards phase 3 trials. Finally, I'd like to just close on the therapeutics. We are supporting 4 programs as priority programs. The Eli Lilly monotherapy monoclonal antibody, as well as the cocktail program. We've ensured access to 950,000 doses of the monotherapy monoclonal. It's being shipped very significantly. Mr. Secretary just shared with you the numbers there. Likewise, with Regeneron, we have an agreement and secured access to 300,000 doses of the cocktail mix of monoclonal antibody from Regeneron, and we were discussing additional access to additional doses, likewise with Eli Lilly. AstraZeneca, we have an agreement where they're testing their very long half-life monoclonal antibodies as prophylactic prophylactic medicines, let's call them, either in subjects at very high risk of acquiring the infection. And the phase 3 trial has started, already recruited 300 subjects, and is currently in the pause for the, as planned, review of safety by the Data Safety Monitoring Board before further recruitment in the trial goes on. And also in a post-exposure prophylaxis trial where people that have been in contact with people who are infected and are suspected to potentially be incubating the virus are treated with the monoclonal to prevent their progression into infection and disease. And then the 4th program is the Oncoimmune Merck partnership now program, very important to treat patients in more advanced stages of disease with very significant impact in the interim analysis of their phase 3 trial on mortality outcome. Exciting, frankly, progress there, but on the other hand, as expressed by myself and Mr. Secretary yesterday, disappointing level of usage of the monoclonal therapies in the hospital setting, well, for patients that are infected but not hospitalized, we really hope to see a much, much higher level of usage of the doses that are delivered to the healthcare facilities, where our surveys for now, they're not yet fully complete, but they show anywhere between 5% and 20%, which for a hospital preventing and therefore life-saving intervention in this setting really is not acceptable. So we look forward to that improving. On that, I will stop and pass on to my co-leader, General Perna.
Dr. Flowey, thank you, and Mr. Secretary, thank you as always. So very exciting week, albeit only the third work day of the week, just really a lot of good things occurring as we execute the initial shipments that went out. I would tell the team, or tell everybody listening, that we've been able to watch the whole process from beginning to end. Partnered with Pfizer, we had senior leaders collaborating with their senior leaders literally on the floor as they were packing and getting ready to distribute boxes this weekend to actual loading of the trucks, right? Really just an excellent collaboration between OWS, and Pfizer. Very impressed with the teamwork there. But then we extended it, right, through security of the shipments with the U.S. Marshals and their ability to track the coordination of handoffs down to FedEx, UPS, and then down to the final administration sites where we dropped off the vaccine, where the CDC dispersed people throughout the country to observe the receipt of the product, really to just get lessons learned and learn how it's being received, the comfort of people receiving it, how they unload the box, how they go ahead, review instructions and initiate execution of administration. We've been seeing it all over the news, people getting doses of vaccine, really a remarkable end-to-end effort. Now, easily said, very difficult to do, and I'm grateful for everybody that's been a part of that, because as we get going, we want to learn lessons, rapidly improve everything we're doing so that we can expand distribution every day, every week, every month to the American people. In that light, as we talked about earlier this week, we are, and the Secretary just highlighted, we are on track with all the deliveries that we said we were doing. The volume was 145 on Monday, 425 yesterday, and 66 today, right? So that was our get out of the gate, get going, really see ourselves, learn a lot. Now tomorrow, we're going to be at 886 deliveries, right? We're going to 886 additional locations in the United States. So it is about a steady drumbeat cadence of delivery of vaccine out to the American people. The Secretary alluded to it, but I want to highlight 2 points, or 1 point with 2 examples. So we can see everything from manufacturing through distribution down to administration sites when it comes to what's happening with the vaccine. 2 points I want to highlight. We had 2 trays of Pfizer vaccine that arrived in California in 2 separate places. And as we were tracking the temperature, we noted that the temperature actually got colder than -80, went to -92. We locked those trays down. Pfizer and OWS working with FedEx and UPS, they never left the truck, right? And we returned them immediately back to Pfizer, and we sent immediate shipments to replace those 2 trays. We're working with the FDA now, CDC, FDA, and Pfizer, to determine if that anomaly is safe or not, but we were taking no chances, and we could see that. The second example, all the way on the other side of the country in Alabama, 2 trays were received at 1 location, same anomaly, right? It went to -92. Again, we were able to stop and quarantine the vaccine, get a replacement shipment immediately to Alabama, and now we're just working through the forensics to determine if the vaccine is still good, et cetera, learning. But the key is we could see ourselves, and we were able to take action. I applaud, right, Pfizer, really remarkable effort FedEx and UPS and the participation of that. So those are types of the lessons we're working our way through. As the Secretary talked about, last night we allocated up to 2 million doses of vaccine for Pfizer out to the jurisdictions. They're working through, their planning and where they want that vaccine to go, and those deliveries will start in our cadence again on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for deliveries, right? It's a constant flow of vaccine, always expanding the distribution network in every state that we're really going for. We are continuing our efforts, as we talked about on Monday, with the long-term health care facilities. Right, I would tell you, Ohio and Connecticut are all set underneath the CDC federal program to begin long-term health care facilities on Friday and Saturday, as we said this week. Really a great effort to start our scale up. We know that Florida and West Virginia are also have started long-term health care facilities utilizing EMTs and or another contractor as the states decided. The point being is we're already doing long-term health care facilities. And come Monday, we will be at over 1,100 different locations starting long-term health care facilities, and that will rapidly expand thousands a day into our process. Over 70,000 facilities that we've coordinated with and that we're working the plan for distribution. CVS and Walgreens are leading this effort in collaboration with the CDC. So we are really aggressively working on the offense to take care of these great Americans in these facilities. So really, I'm very, very excited about where we're going with that, and we'll continue to report on that accordingly. As we talked briefly about what is next, right? So I just talked about some tactical execution of the delivery, but we're already expanding our thoughts to vaccine dosages becoming more and more available as we're more confident with the manufacturing and distribution. And so what do we want to be able to enable next? So the CDC and 19 pharmacy chains, right, are collaborating. I received a very extensive briefing on Saturday. I participated in the call with the 19 pharmacies and the CDC, and they've established and are working through the final details to enable governor plans about allowing access to all these facilities throughout our country. So in simple terms, as soon as we can turn the key on this, and we're looking sometime about mid-January as doses really become available, but won't be locked to one date. It'll be driven by states' decisions and vaccine availability. What we see is an expansion of capacity for administration of vaccines up to about 37,000 brick-and-mortar facilities. Right? This is really just a powerful collaboration with the pharmacies and the CDC, but most importantly, enabling the governor's plans to expand vaccination throughout their states as we transition to other really critical groups. So really excited about that, and we'll keep you updated as we go forward on that. The last thing I would tell you, and it's not lost on you if you've heard me talk before, this is the beginning, right? It was a great start, but every day we have to hold ourselves accountable to very high standards. We have to continue to learn, and we have to just get better every day. Because at the end of the day, it is about safe and effective vaccines and therapeutics for the American people. I would leave you with this. It's a whole of America approach. And it's being illuminated through the state's plannings and execution, as you saw. Really want to give them kudos for the elaborate work and execution accordingly. I will again reemphasize, as the Secretary mentioned, the reason why we're so confident in what we're doing. We have the professionals executing it, whether it's Pfizer and hopefully Moderna here shortly, but really FedEx and UPS, right down through the pharmacies, It's what's given us the confidence, because they do this every day. And they're demonstrating their professionalism and their organizational culture in execution, right? The high standards and the accountability that they're accepting. Yesterday, I had a phone call with Wes Wheeler from UPS and Richard Smith from FedEx, the two CEOs. Both of them were ensuring me, as we were looking at the weather maps, right, for today in the Northeast and later in the week for the Northwest, right, how were we going to mitigate and continue the flow of vaccines? These two leaders knew exactly the weather report. They had people planning, mitigating strategies for distribution, and they were making contact with customers. They're establishing rules saying that if somebody is not there because of the weather, even though they're there, we retain the vaccine. It goes back secure and delivered the next day. I mean, that's what these two leaders and their companies are involved in. I assured them that I would underwrite a leader's decision in the delivery of the vaccine to ensure driver, pilot safety, and safety of the vaccine. I said, leaders, you make the call. I will underwrite the distribution accordingly. I was so impressed by their ability to see themselves, make mitigating plans, and hold themselves accountable that I'm here talking about it today, and I just wanted to pass to the American people. The last thing I would tell you, as we're working through things, we're not stopping. You heard Dr. Salawi talk about where we're at with continuing to bring additional vaccines, to bear, hopefully Janssen and AstraZeneca. But we're also working inside of our manufacturing facilities to expand capacity every day. Dr. Salawi and I visited Catalent, who's working to expand their capabilities. Secretary was just there yesterday or the other day? Yesterday. Between our visit, Dr. Salawi, myself, and the Secretary's visit, which has been about 10 days, we were able to get the Army Corps of Engineers there to help them assess, participate, and help really work through ideas to expand capacity more rapidly so that we could get more doses of vaccine more rapidly. We actually think this is going to come to fruition, and we'll have more vaccine from potentially once EUA is done from Moderna. Right? So we are always constantly trying to expand and rapidly increase the availability of safe and effective vaccine for the American people. Mr. Secretary, that concludes my comments.
Thank you, General. We're now open for questions. Michael?
Thank you all, Operator. We will now open it up for questions. A reminder when asking, please state your name and publication and keep your questions as short as possible so we can get to as many as we can in the time that we have. I'll turn it over to you now, Operator.
Thank you. And if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name. If you need to withdraw your question, press *2. Please announce your name and outlet before asking your question. And our first question comes from Humara Ofan with Fox, and your line is now open.
Hi, this is Umar Irfan. I'm a reporter at Vox. For Dr. Salawi and General Parna, could you provide a little bit of context here as to the scale of this endeavor compared to other vaccination efforts in the past, compared to, say, smallpox, polio, or even the annual influenza vaccinations? How much bigger and how much faster is this effort to roll out a COVID-19 vaccine? What is the relevant metric to compare this to?
Yeah, so if we talk about vaccination, every year in the U.S., between 80 million and 100 million doses of flu vaccines are distributed. And therefore, we're talking about something that's maybe 3 or 4 times bigger over a period that's probably similar, 6 months, because the flu vaccines are distributed from the month of August to the month of December or so. So that's, I would say, the distribution aspect and the immunization aspect, I think, are not very significantly different, and that's the reason why using the existing capabilities and resources is the appropriate and the right thing to do, and that's why our level of confidence is very significant. Of course, upstream of that, in terms of discovering, developing, manufacturing the vaccine, it's been dramatically faster, but again, not by cutting any corners, but rather by using judgment in terms of which vaccines to go after and how to test them, and running everything in parallel, and taking the financial and operational risk, but not any cutting any corners. And touch wood, up to now it's been productive.
The other difference is that, just for context, is influenza is ordered. And so based on orders from hospitals, doctors' offices, pharmacies, that is what industry produces. And there's a very, a timetable associated with the distribution, as Dr. Salawi just talked about. In this case, what we're doing with the COVID vaccine is we're pushing. So we're coming up with our availability, and then we're distributing based on allocations. So that is, it's a pull versus a push, which makes planning and execution a little bit more difficult. But as I said, the states have really transitioned well on this, and their leadership is well involved, and that's why we're having so much success.
Great, thank you. Next question, please.
And our next question comes from Sarah Murray with CNN. Your line is now open.
Hi, thank you guys very much for doing the call. One of my questions is, just now that we're going to see a broader distribution effort around the Moderna vaccine, assuming that it's authorized, can you give us a better sense of what kinds of locations the vaccine will be headed to that we haven't seen from the Pfizer vaccine? And just to follow on that, we're hearing some concerns from states about the timetable turnaround of when they're getting the allocations to when they need to figure out where these places need to go. Has there been any consideration about that timetable?
Yeah, so I'll turn over to General Perna about the Moderna question, but just so you know, we have the Vice President convenes a regular call with governors. Usually it's on Monday afternoons, and General Perna and I gave an update on vaccine distribution, as we have been doing for the last couple of months with the nation's governors. And we got some really good feedback on the last call, addressing exactly the question you're raising. As you know, we had been setting out the allocations on Friday to ship on Sunday, or to ship over the weekend, and then the following Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And the request from the governors was a bit more advanced time on that. And so that's why you heard General Perna say, he's now switched the cadence to Tuesday night. So Tuesday night, as he says, snap the chalk line.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And tell them their allocations so that they can have several more days of planning for us to initiate the shipping for the following week. But General, on that, or on the Moderna shipping locations,
sure.
Anything?
So, Mr. Secretary, you nailed it, and it was a great feedback by the governors and their ability to have some more time. So what we did is, our goal is to get all available doses of vaccine out to the American people, as we've talked about. And so I just had to facilitate an update to understand exactly what we thought was going to be releasable, and then I could snap the chalk line. And so my thing is normal repetition from now forward. The Pfizer vaccine allocations will be in on Tuesday nights, and if EUA is approved for Moderna, they'll be also included in the Tuesday night allocation, and then states can just order based on their allocations accordingly. So I think really a great effort there. Reference Moderna locations, I would tell you that you're going to see a lot of the similar capability and capacity, or delivered to the same types of capability and capacity. It will start to expand out to rural type areas, I believe, as I remember reflecting on plans. And there'll be more allocations towards nursing homes in execution of that, nursing home long-term health care facilities. So current, primary hospitals still included, but I think you'll see more expansion of the Moderna vaccine. Remember, because of the planning and what was available, we were able to send out more Moderna on the first dose than we were able to send out on Pfizer, almost double.
Great. Thank you, General. Next question, please.
And our next question comes from Ricardo Pelosa-Valdebar with Associated Press. And your line is now open.
Hi, thank you for doing these calls. Ricardo Alonso Zaldivar with the Associated Press. And my question is, could you please provide an update on negotiations with Pfizer for additional doses of their vaccine? When would that be available? And can you provide some insight on the earlier decision to decline the option to purchase more Pfizer vaccine? How will this impact the cadence that General Perna talks about, the cadence of delivery?
Thank you, Ricardo. Obviously, we have to be careful. We are engaged in active negotiations on a procurement matter, so there's only so much we're able to discuss with you. Just as we've said, though, publicly, we are in active discussions with Pfizer about exercising additional options under our contract. The core issue, as it was on the initial question, there's been so much misunderstanding out there, is Pfizer's ability to manufacture by a date certain. And we are working with them to provide them whatever assistance. Now that they have identified some of their production challenges that they've got, we've been working with them on what assistance is appropriate for us to provide in order for us to secure additional doses. We're working towards additional doses for that second quarter. You know, they're right now producing at their maximum capacity to deliver on the 100 million that is in the first tranche of the contract with us, and we're providing manufacturing support as we have really from the beginning with Pfizer. It's important to understand that the Pfizer relationship, while it is very much part of Operation Warp Speed, is a different contractual relationship than the other 5 vaccine manufacturers. On the other 5, we are more intimately engaged in the support of the development and manufacturing of their product on an ongoing basis, whereas the relationship that Pfizer wanted with Operation Warp Speed was the guaranteed purchase of vaccine if approved by the FDA. And that means that to date, we have had less visibility into their manufacturing processes, their manufacturing capacities, their locations, and supplies, raw material issues, supply chain management, than we do with, say, a Moderna or an AstraZeneca or a Johnson & Johnson. And so part of our ongoing discussions is to remediate that and get better visibility into what they're doing, what challenges they're facing, because they've made significant commitments to us and others, and their manufacturing, as you know, they ended up coming short half of what they thought they would be able to produce and had announced they'd be able to produce just in the year 2020. But General or Dr. Slaoui, could you give any additional perspective? I know, Dr. Slaoui, you could maybe talk particularly about this misunderstanding that's out there about the additional options.
Yes, I think any reasonable person would understand that we built a portfolio of vaccines and took them into development in order to ensure that A, one of them at least makes it to the finish line, and B, if more than one makes it to the finish line, that we can accrue and accumulate vaccine doses faster than if we were relying on a single provider. So frankly, I hope once and for all, it wouldn't make sense whatsoever to pre-order more from one vaccine manufacturer than any other one before we knew a vaccine works. I don't know what rationale drives people to ask that question. You wouldn't buy something before you knew it works if you had 6 opportunities to have one provider provide you with what you needed. Number one. Number two, in order to ensure that we would be in a position to acquire more vaccine doses if and when a vaccine had first signs of performance, we built options in each and every one of our agreement. Right? That's the right thing to do. That's the thoughtful way to allocate resources and taxpayers' money. As soon as we knew that the vaccine works, the negotiations started, and I think the Secretary really described the nature of the partnership that we have with different companies. Some are more arm's length, I call them, and others are extremely more involved. And when Pfizer was unable to specify when vaccine doses would be delivered, we don't need 100 million doses of vaccine started in September or December of 2021. We need them in the second quarter if they make it into the second quarter. And frankly, if they don't, I think there are enough vaccine doses, as you could see through the first option agreement with Moderna, now doubling the amount of vaccine doses we have, and with the Janssen's vaccine coming in, and the AstraZeneca after it, and the Novavax vaccine. I think the strategy is really happening exactly as we planned it, and we, of course, would welcome having another 100 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine, and we're negotiating with them appropriately. And, our expectation is for that to complete shortly.
We have time for 2 more questions.
General, did you have any, are you good with that?
I am. I'm very good with that. My co-leader nailed it. You nailed it.
I mean, Ricardo, and this keeps getting asked over and over again. We'll keep answering it. We now have 900 million doses of vaccine that we have contracted for the delivery of. We have options that increase that to a total of 3 billion doses of vaccine. We have 100 million of Moderna set between now and March 31st. 100 million of Pfizer between now and March 31st. 100 million additional Moderna in the second quarter. We are working actively with Pfizer, and I will just say that I am very optimistic that we will conclude a successful result there. We have Johnson & Johnson with 100 million in active production, single dose. So that is 100 million people right there. AstraZeneca, I believe it's 300 million on AstraZeneca, okay? So we believe when you take 330 million Americans, you take off the non-indicated populations of about 70 million people below age 16, if you just do the math on that, we've got now the vaccine contracted for with delivery, we believe, subject, of course, to Moderna approval and success of, adding in either a Johnson & Johnson or an AstraZeneca, we believe that we will have actually surplus supplies of vaccine, and that's why the President signed his executive order that made the commitment that we will take that surplus capacity, not just surplus vaccine, but also surplus manufacturing capacity, and use that for the benefit of the world community. So, one last question, Michael?
One last question, yes, sir.
And our last question comes from Leanne Winnick with CBS News. Your line is now open.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm curious about working with Pfizer to increase capacity. Are there any shortages of supplies, such as reagents, and is there any move or request to invoke the Defense Production Act to help them acquire that? And then just a quick note, I'm curious about the Christmas holiday. Is everybody working straight through Christmas in terms of Pfizer and the delivery people and the administration? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. So on the first part of your question with regard to Pfizer, again, because as Dr. Slaoui described it, it's a more arm's length relationship there. We have recently been informed by them, finally, of various challenges that they might have in their manufacturing, and we will ensure that by whatever mechanism we provide them full support to ensure that they can produce for the American people, fulfill their contractual commitments, as well as any assistance needed to ensure that they're able to add commitments to us subject to our needs. So we've done that already. We've been working with them, as General Perna can talk about. We've been working to optimize where companies will let us, working to optimize production. We've added significant capacity to Moderna through the work, whether it's the Army Corps of Engineers work at the Catalent facility, which is our fill-finish facility, or our work at Emergent, where we're actually doing the bulk production for Moderna, adding scale to the bulk production capabilities there. So we hope to actually increase our yields there even beyond what we've talked about. And we will gladly do that, as we've been doing with Pfizer, to ensure that they meet their commitments, but also so they can add additional commitments to us. And we'll use any power we need to make that happen.
Yeah, I would just add, we've already been working with Pfizer, just like all of our companies, to help them facilitate, enable execution. And so we are well versed on supply chain for materials and well-versed on supply chain for equipment that produces the vaccine. And so I'm very comfortable in our ability to help prioritize and enable to meet the effects that we want, right? Safe and effective vaccines for the American people.
And could you talk a bit about the holidays coming up?
Oh, yes, I apologize, Mr. Secretary. So the only day, and it's really Christmas Day on Friday, is the day that we will execute as required an emergency distribution if something happens through our cadence in the week. But the plan right now is not to deliver on Fridays. And then, we'll start producing or packaging Saturday and Sunday and begin our cadence the following week. So we think we can distribute all the way through next Thursday, be in a good place, to let Christmas Day, except for emergencies, and then really start our cadence up Saturday and Sunday. There's variances or nuances to that, but in general, that's the plan.
Great. So we're going to keep a very active cadence of making ourselves available to brief you, the members of the media, so that you have information as we go through this really historic mobilization and vaccination program. But even as we answer detailed questions about the logistics, about the vaccines, the development programs, our contracting, I hope we can step back a bit and just do recognize this is a momentous week. This is just in the history of public health to have a 94% plus vaccine, safe and effective, approved within 11 months of a novel pathogen hitting our shores, being distributed in the supplies of the millions to protect our healthcare workers and to protect our most vulnerable citizens. And then within days, we hope, to have another 94% plus safe and effective vaccine added to our arsenal with tens of millions of doses, hundreds of millions of doses coming in the months ahead, is truly something historic. And I hope we can just recognize that protection for our heroes, our healthcare workers on the front lines, and our protection for our most vulnerable comes through this. We're not at the end, but as the General says, we're at the beginning of the end of this terrible pandemic. So thank you for being with us, and we'll keep this cadence going with you to make sure you've got the information you need. Thank you.
Thank you all. Please send any follow-up questions to our press office at media@hhs.gov. I'll turn it over to the operator to close out the call.
Thank you. And that concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.